2nd Battalion Coldstream Guards, Lieutenant-Colonel Daniel MacKinnon. Brussels, 23rd June 1815. Our division broke up from their cantonments in and about Enghien on the 16th instant. Made a forced march through Steenkerke, Braine-le-Comte, Nivelles, and formed on the right of the Prussians at Quatre Bras. They had been fighting all day. By 9 in the evening, the enemy was repulsed at all points. During the night, their cavalry got into Blucher's position, taking 14 guns and putting hors de combat 15,000 men, the consequence of which was the Prussians were obliged to fall back on Wavre. The next morning, the Duke of Wellington retired through Genappe and took up a position on the right of the Prussians, covering the two great roads to Brussels, his headquarters at Waterloo, the right resting on Braine-l'Alleud and extending to the forest of Soigny, the left joining the Prussians. Our division formed the center a little above a large farmhouse, La Belle Alliance, which was the point attacked and occupied by the light company of the division. The Grenadier and 3 other companies of the Coldstreams under my command were ordered to charge the enemy who had surrounded the house. I was wounded in the act, also had a beautiful grey horse shot. However, I did the best that lay in my power and succeeded in repulsing them till relieved by the remainder of the battalion. The whole were then obliged to fortify ourselves in the farmyard, which was where we ordered to defend, let what would oppose us. In short, we remained in it till night against repeated attacks of the French army. At last it was demolished and burned to the ground by the enemy's cannon. My poor dun horse has been almost burned to death. He lost an eye. My servant says he must be shot. The day preceding I also lost a horse, so you will see I have lost all 3 of my English horses. The ball struck me exactly on the gap of the knee, so you may suppose the pain is most excruciating. Lord Hay was killed on the 16th. Yes, since writing this letter I am much better and have passed a good night and feel in great spirits. Adieu. Ensign Charles Short, Monday 19 June, Nivelles. My dear mother, I hope you will excuse me my not writing to you before, but since we left Enghien on Friday morning at 3 o'clock, I have not had the least opportunity. We received orders to march at 1 in the morning in consequence of Bonaparte's having crossed the frontier and attacked the Prussians. Colonel Woodford was at a ball with Lord Wellington at Brussels when the news came, and they all set off directly for their different posts and arrived at them about the time we were ordered to start in their ball dresses. We marched at 3 o'clock, the 16th, to Braine-le-Comte, where we halted for about 4 hours, and then towards Nivelles, and were going to bivouac. When we heard a cannon fire on the other side of Nivelles, we then marched forward and reached the place of action at Quatre Bras at about 7:30. Having marched 25 miles since 3 in the morning, the men were very much fagged indeed. The 1st Brigade of Guards, being in the front, went into action immediately, and in a very little time lost 500 men and nearly 30 officers killed and wounded between the 2 battalions. Our brigade was drawn up in a road on the left of a thick wood, Bois de Bossu, to be ready to relieve the 1st Brigade, and about 8:30 we received orders to march through the wood in line and charge the French on the other side. However, they retired, but throughout the day by the English, Brunswickers and Dutch, though not half of our army had arrived. The Belgians ran at the first shot. We then retired to our position, and I, being first for duty, went on an outlying piquet, it being the first time I was on this duty and nobody to direct me. I kept a sharp look out and did the best I could by placing my sentries to give the alarm in case any attack should be made. The night, however, passed off very well, though the groaning of the wounded was rather disagreeable or so for the first time. I was very hungry the next morning, having had nothing to eat since 10 o'clock the day before, but a ship biscuit. I was called in about 4 o'clock. I then went to sleep and awoke about 5:30 when I found Whittaker had sent me some bread and meat and a bottle of brandy, which I assure you was a great comfort, not being able to draw rations, Lord Wellington, who had not pulled off his ball dress, commanded, and we found it necessary to make a retrograde movement rather to the left to communicate with the Prussians, who had been also attacked and beat the French back, but they made an attack in the middle of the night with the whole of the cavalry and broke the Prussians, who retreated in consequence. We also retreated, the 17th, to a position about 8 miles to the other side of Genappe, in a direct road to Brussels. The name of the place I do not know. You will see it in the Gazette, and it will be remembered by Europe as long as Europe is Europe. We had just arrived and pitched our blankets, etc., and the men began to make themselves comfortable when cannonading was heard and the rear guard was engaged with the French. The rear guard was composed of cavalry who came up in the night. The French took up a position opposite ours. Our right rested on a wood in which the light infantry of our division was posted, it being most likely that would be the point the French would make their attack on. Our brigade was on the right of the first line, on a hill above the wood. We were unarmed the whole night, expecting an attack, and it rained to that degree that the field where we were was halfway up our legs in the mud.
Nobody, of course, could lie down, and the ague got hold of some of the men. I, with another officer, had a blanket, and with a little more gin, we kept up very well. We had only one fire, and you cannot conceive of the state we were in. We formed a hollow square and prepared to receive cavalry twice, but found it was a false alarm both times. Soon after daylight, the commissary sent up, with the greatest difficulty, some gin, and we found an old cask full of wet rye loaves, which we breakfasted upon. Everybody was in high spirits. We broke up the cask and got some dry wood and made some fine fires, got some straw, and I went to sleep for a couple of hours. About 10 we were formed, finding that the French were advancing to the attack in very large columns. We opened some artillery and checked them a little by shells, but soon after the light troopers commenced the attack on the wood in which our light infantry were posted, and the firing commenced in prime style. Some Belgian light troops were in the woods, and when one man was wounded, at least a dozen would carry him out so that the chief of their work, the work, was left for our men. The French were too strong for us, and after about a couple of hours they succeeded in driving us back to a large farmhouse in the wood, Hougemel, and the rest of our battalion moved on to support the light infantry when the 2 rear companies were ordered to remain with the colours. General Byng, thinking that the battalion would be too much cut to pieces as the firing was so very rapid. The 7th and 8th companies stopped with the colours, and 2 companies of each battalion of our division, I believe I told you in my last of my being recently appointed to the 7th company, we were ordered to lie down in the road, the musket shots flying over us like peas. An officer next to me was hit on the cap, but not hurt, as it went through, and another next to him was also hit on the plate of the cap, but it went through also without hurting him. 2 sergeants that lay near me were hit in their knapsacks and were not hurt, besides several other shots passing as near us as possible. I never saw such luck as we had. The brigade major was wounded by a cannonball which killed his horse and broke his arm, and General Byng was wounded slightly while standing opposite to me about 5 paces. General Byng did not leave the field. Lord Wellington with his ball dress was very active indeed, as well as Lord Uxbridge and the Prince of Orange, both severely wounded, the former having lost his leg and the latter being hit in the body. General Cook, commanding our division, lost his arm. The battle kept up all day in this wood where our brigade was stationed. The farmhouse was set on fire by shells, however we kept possession of it, and several wounded men were actually roasted alive. The cavalry came on about 5 o'clock and attacked the rest of the line, when the Horse Guards and the other regiments, except a few, behaved most gallantly. The French charged our hollow squares and were repulsed several times. The Imperial Guards, with Napoleon at their head, charged the First Guards, and the number of killed and wounded is extraordinary. They lie as thick as possible, one on top of the other. They were repulsed in every attack, and about 7 o'clock the whole French army made a general attack for their last effort, and we should have had very hard work to have repulsed them when 25,000 Prussians came on, and we soon drove them like chaff before the wind. 20,000, getting into the midst of them, played the very devil with them, and they took to flight in the greatest possible hurry. The baggage of Bonaparte was taken by the Prussians, and the last report that has been heard of the French says that they have repassed the frontiers and have gone by Charleroi, hard pressed by the Prussians. The French say that this battle beats Leipzig hollow in the number of killed and wounded. Our division suffered exceedingly. We are to follow on Thursday. Today we bivouac near Nivelles. Lord Wellington has thanked our division through General Byng and says that he never saw such gallant conduct in his life. The 7th Hussars behaved very badly on Saturday. They were ordered to charge the Polish Lancers, and when they got to them, the Lancers remaining steady, they turned about and away they went. The Lancers then charged them and the Horse Guards and Blues, charging the Lancers overthrew them and cut them nearly all to pieces. The Horse Guards and Blues have behaved famously. Lord Uxbridge would have been taken only for our infantry, in consequence of some of the cavalry running away, and he rode up to the company and said he owed his life to them and that the French were beyond the frontier before 12 o'clock. There never was such a glorious day. Everybody agrees. Send me the Gazette. It will tell you more than I can. You must excuse the mistakes I have made. I am in such a hurry. I will give a fuller account of some little things relative to myself, the narrow escapes we had, and so on, when I have time. I had my horse killed. It was very beautiful to see the engagement, though horrid afterwards. The French killed a great number of our wounded soldiers. We have taken 120 pieces of cannon. The Prussians are coming up every hour and cheer us as they pass. I have a great deal more to say, but I have not time, as I must be back at the camp by 8 o'clock. All the baggage was sent to Antwerp, in case we should have been defeated yesterday. The number of prisoners is immense. I must conclude. God grant that I may live to see you again. We have only 2 officers killed, but several severely wounded. My love to you. I have heard nothing of Major Hodge. I remain your dutiful and affectionate son, C.W. Short. Ensign James Hervey, Genappe, 16th of June. To Mrs. Lloyd, Hotel de Flandre. My dear Mrs. Lloyd, the enemy attacked both the Duke and Blucher without making the slightest impression on either. Indeed, both are rather more advanced than in the morning. Adieu, yours sincerely, J.M. Hervey.